Today we're integrating a router table into our custom workbench. On That's How We Do It. This is a video continuing my series on a custom build for a rolling workbench with a built-in router table. Today I'm going to be installing the Bosch RA1181 Router Table and the Bosch 1617 EVS 2¼ horsepower router into my bench. If you haven't seen the workbench build and would like to, there's a link in the description below, along with other links to videos in this series. The first thing we need to do is separate the pieces we will need and the ones that we won't be using. Since I will be dropping the table directly into my bench, I won't need the two router table stand pieces, so I can set these aside. I will then need to grab the actual router table and place it on top of my bench. The table is 18 inches wide and 27 inches long. I already set my spacing between my 2x4s to be 18 inches when building my workbench, so now we just need to make some adjustments for the length side of the table. I have some extra pieces of 2x4 that are planed down to make them approximately 1 inch, or until they are the necessary thickness to allow for the space between the sides of the bench to be 27 inches. I then put glue on it and screw it into the sides of the interior of the workbench so the router table will fit snug into place. I took a large drill bit and went underneath my table, making a hole in the corners of the space provided for the router table. I then tape off the top of my workbench in the dimensions of my router table to help prevent tear out on the plywood while making my cuts. I then drew lines between the holes to give me a guide to cut with my rigid jigsaw. After cutting the hole for the router table, I used my cordless rigid router and a flush trim router bit to go around the cut edge and make it flush with the 2x4s underneath the bench top. I have included links to all the tools I have used in the description below. I then drop in the router table. It is a snug fit, so I'm using a rubber mallet and a level to put everything into place, making sure everything is flush with the workbench top and on a level surface. The router table has cutouts on the bottom that we are going to use to secure them to our workbench. To secure the router table to the workbench, I'm using 5/16 24x3 hex cap screws. I drew holes through the 2x4s on the workbench where the cutouts in the router table are located. On the outside of the 2x4s, where the drill bit comes out, I use a 1-inch spade bit to make a hole for my hex screw and washer to fit in. This will allow the screw to sit inside the 2x4 and not stick out. I fastened down the router table by using 2 hex screws on both sides. I then tighten down all the screws and I move on to the router plate. We need to make sure the router plate is level to ensure a flat and even surface. The plate needs to be even with the tabletop so our workpieces can run smoothly through the router. The router table comes with 8 leveling bolts. These bolts are placed into hex nuts, which will then be inserted into the router table. I use the included Allen wrench to bring the bolts up and down as needed to set a level surface for the router plate. Once I adjust all the bolts to where I think the plate will be level, I put the plate on to check and see if the plate is sitting on top of all the bolts or if they need to be adjusted. I lightly tap on the surface of the plate going around the outer edge. If the bolt is not touching the bottom of the plate, it will easily move, and I can make the adjustments with my Allen wrench. I put some pressure on the plate with my hand and turn the bolt until I feel the plate start to lift. I then know it is touching the plate. I work my way around until the plate no longer wobbles and all the bolts are touching it. This does take time and becomes a tedious process. I use my level to run it across the surface and make sure that the plate is even with the table and is level. Making adjustments to the bolts is needed. I won't tighten down the plate just yet, as we still need to attach our router. I remove my router from the box and use a Phillips screwdriver to remove the round plastic piece on the router's surface so I can secure the router to the plate. You can remove the handles or leave them attached. I'm choosing to leave them attached. I will be adding a custom dust collection system onto this router and completing a video about it. It will be listed in the description below. We will now add the router to the plate. Looking at the plate, we can see there are several different holes to accommodate different types of routers. Taking a look at the directions, we can see that the holes correspond with different letters. We flip through the directions to a chart with a list of routers on it. We find our type of router and see what type of hole pattern corresponds with our router. We have a 1617 series, so we need to use hole pattern B. Going back to the diagram, we locate all the holes labeled B. I then orientate the diagram to the plate. I use post-it notes to mark the holes I need to use on the router plate. I place the plate on top of my router and center it. Then, I just move the router plate in a circular motion until I found where the B holes in the plate line up with the holes in the router. This made it particularly easy to locate the holes in the plate to use and which position the router will go in under the plate. I used the bolts that came with the router table to attach the router to the plate. I drop the router into the table. Because the weight of the router has been added to the plate, I check again to make sure everything is level and even before securing down the plate. I use the bolts that came with the router table to attach the plate to the table. The bolts are placed in the four corners of the plate and the nuts secure the bolts from underneath the table. I'm now going to install the router switch onto the side of my bench. The switch has angle supports for the screw holes that I will need to notch out in my bench to make sure the switch sits flush. I use a straight router bit to put some grooves into my bench where the angled supports on the switch are going to be located. I lined up where the switch needs to go and marked on my bench where I need to cut the grooves so the switch will sit flush where I want. I'm then able to slide my switch into place and secure it with some screws. I plug in my router into one of the outlets on the back of the switch. The other outlet is for a dust collection system to activate when the switch is turned on. This will allow for the router and the dust collection to be activated at the same time. I won't be using this as I have a different idea for my dust collection which I will go over in a later video. I'm going to use an eye hook and a zip tie to get the router cord out of the way. I attach an eye hook to my bench and zip tie the cord to it. I then assemble the fence which came with my router table. I get all my fence pieces out and organize them to make it easier to put together. We use these plastic pieces that fit both into the guard as well as the fence track. This will allow the guard to move up and down. The feather boards will be attached the same way. The guard is easily adjustable to allow for different sizes of wood. I lined up my fence with the fence slots in the router table. I push the bolt through the slot in the router table and up through the fence. I apply the washer and finally the turn handle that will be used to tighten or loosen and allow the fence to move back and forth. I attach the feather boards onto the fence. We can see how easily the feather boards are able to slide into any position we need. This will keep everything together for me when I remove the fence and use my bench without the router. The table comes with 3 different size router plates. The only thing we have left to do is test the router. Let's make some chips. Thanks for joining us today. I've included links in the description for items used in today's video. If you liked what you saw, please hit that like and subscribe button so we can get more content out to you. If you didn't like what you saw, smash that thumbs down button twice to really let us have it. Until next time, this is John for That's How We Do It, brought to you by Rustic American Woodworks.